Today's guest on Mindful Leaders is Tatev Petrossian, an inspiring designer, entrepreneur, and visionary. Born to Armenian parents and raised in France, Tatev's deep ancestral connection to the regions of Mush, Sasun, Van, and Yegheknadzor has been a cornerstone in her life journey. After working in financial and strategy management, Tatev founded Revolve Consulting, a company centered on design thinking and the circular economy. However, the war in Artsakh triggered a powerful transformation in her life. Confronting pain and loss, she found strength and channeled her emotions into a driving force for change. This shift led her to the world of design with a deeper, purpose-driven focus. In 2022, Tatev and her sister Emma founded Atelier 79, a French-Armenian fine jewellery studio to challenge traditional norms by infusing each unique piece with rich stories. In this episode, we delve into Tatev's passion for creativity and innovation. We discuss how she has used her entrepreneurial journey to create design spaces that encourage mindfulness, meaning, and compassion. Through her work, Tatev reminds us that despite life's challenges, we always have the choice to pursue endeavors with purpose, vision, and consciousness. Tatev, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me on Mindful Leaders.
Thank you for having me, Lara-Jan.
So, Tatev, what is the earliest context or childhood memory you can share with us to help us understand who Tatev Petrossian is? Help us relive a little bit about, relive a memory of yours that pops out.
I think earliest that I can go for that kind of defines a little bit, my current identity. I would say, I remember I was in first grade probably. Emma was my sister, was still a toddler. And she was kind of 4 years old, getting ready for a very big show she had been spotted to do, like a singing show. And I remember being really behind her. I was like 6, 7 years old. We were freshly into this new house that we got. It was the first house that we moved as a family of 4. Before that, we were, with grandparents. It was the beginning of our immigration journey. So we're kind of like big family under one roof. And this house was kind of the first foundational house we had as a family of 4. And I remember working with Emma, training with her with cassette, audio tape to figure out what song she will sing, when she will have to start, what should have been her voice, tonality and stuff. So I was like really kind of managing already and being a producer of her own sort of like talent that she kind of had from, it was a given talent for her. And she's always been the artist in the family, and I've always been kind of the more jarbik, jadbadik, person, kind of arranging, managing, talking, presenting. So, and I don't know why when you mentioned that, that's kind of like the first memory that came in, because it's, to this day, yeah, of course, the balance and the dynamic of our relation changed, but we're still very identifying as this very family-centered and a very connected bond that kind of defines.
So she remains to be the more artistic person. You're the more the strategist and the manager and the investor and the entrepreneur.
Well, yeah, those are like a lot of of my career through that you mentioned here. But yeah, I would say it's kind of that. Although we balanced it, it's much more nuanced now. She's also like now doing her PhD. She joined the academic world, so things have changed. But I will say that. Synergy of art and management, art and accountability, more hard science is still very present in our bond and who we are and what we're doing today, actually, in the present.
So if I remember correctly, your family, your parents actually with you, you were still a baby when they left Armenia and repatriated to France, first to Marseille, then to Nice. And that's where Emma was, Emma was born in Marseille, but that's where your family, that's where you grew up, basically.
Exactly.
But your connection with Armenia has always been there because, your, distant relatives and your cousins and your, extended family were always in Armenia. I'll get to the Armenia aspect a little bit later. What I'm trying to understand is how much of who your parents were and your great-grandparents, and I say great-grandparents, not just your grandparents, but the Mush, the Van, the Sasun, the background that actually makes you, and the Yegheknadzor that makes you who you are, how much of it is still alive in who you are today?
I would say it's fully alive. I come from I would say a tree that is very much anchored with strong woman being kind of the leader and the foundational ground of the family story. If I go from my father's side or from my mother's side, both, I would say, trees are really starting with strong women. You know, strong, very combative, very like grinders, right? They were hustlers even back then. Yeah. So I know my parents' side, you know, Satenik is kind of like the mother of my grandfather.
Yeah, on your father's side.
Yeah, exactly, on my father's side. And she was this she left Mush, and she was married with this very like handsome gentleman, but he was from a very rich family, and he didn't have the strength she had. She had very strong physical strength as well. And so you know, we grew up with this story that she crossed the Artsakh river when they exiled during the genocide, putting her husband on her shoulder and crossing the river with her husband on her shoulder and being early pregnant. She didn't know it yet, but she was already pregnant back then with what would be the sisters of my
grandfather.
My grandfather, exactly. So it's, I mean, you know, those stories really shaped me, I believe, also as the person I am, as the woman I am today. And you have also the very artistic side. Funnily enough, on my mother's side, which is the very rational part of who I am today. So her ancestors were from Sasun and Yegheknadzor. And their sort of like a ground family member was Nano Tatik. And Nano was, she was called Nano Ashur in her village. So she was very famous for walking, doing poetries, like she would speak in rhymes and Alexandrin, you know, as we say in French. So she was known to be like that very wisdom source in the village. People will go to her for a big dinner, big festivities, so that she can say a word, say a poetry or something. So I would say, even if we go back to, you know, the sort of early century of our family roots, it's always defined by a very combative and strong woman in art and in
management, even.
Management, yeah. Somehow, yeah.
Carrie. So I do see a lot of Satenik in you.
There is, I guess,
you know, but there's also the art aspect of it as well. I see that because you are a breath of fresh air, and I'm not saying this to actually just toot your horn. I think the intention here is I've seen a lot of the work that you've been doing, both in Armenia and outside of Armenia. And I say breath of fresh air because I grew up in a generation where we would always have to have a specific calling and a specific linear career, you know, very straight. You're born, you study, and you go into a career of this sort. And you, like many people that I respect, have had a multiple of talents and have used the potential of your talents as much as possible. So you start your career, you know, in France and in London, obviously, in finance and investment, in strategy. Then you actually move to Moscow, where you teach at the Faculty of Finance at the Presidential Academy. Then you come to Armenia and you're working with your consulting firm in strategy and everything related to the circular economy. We'll get into that a little bit later. My point of the story is that then you come and established with your sister Atelier 79. Very different from where you started and where you are now. Tell me, is it really relevant that this whole hype about purpose and calling, is it very relevant today? Or what advice would you give a person like me, for instance, who would say, you know, what does it mean to have a calling, and do we need to, and how do you tap into the potential that you are born with, the different talents that you may have? What advice would you give?
I don't know, giving an advice in my position will be a little bit too presumptuous, but I would say, I do believe, you know, I almost had like really the same kind of upbringing that you, in the sense that as a first generation, as the older in the family of first generation immigrant in France, I also was shaped to be this sort of like, you become the best student of your class, you stay the best student of your class, most importantly, and you graduate the best school. So I've always, all my choices were driven from that lens of like, what is the most elitist place? What is the, you know, where the best student of the class go? So I've never really took time in my early life, I would say, to wonder what I was made for. I knew I wanted to be in a position of influence, somewhere where I can negotiate, I can deal, I can, you know, wear all those like fancy material stuff. You know, I've had like really stupid sort of like aspiration back then. But when you start in this sort of adult,
we've all had,
right? We all have those like, I have to look like this, be in that sort of like quarter, work in, you know, big trade centers, etc. So I kind of was also guided by that for the good chunk of my first part of life, young life, I would say. And then things started to change because I realized that, you know, life was throwing very, I would say, diverse chapter to me in very surprising way. And I've always been one to kind of never seek comfort in my achievement, but seek comfort in what I dream to still accomplish. So whenever I feel I'm too much comfortable in something I have done, I feel like it's time for you to change. And somehow, whether it's, I don't know how you call it, the universe, God, you know, this sort of superior force up there, it kind of comes to me as like an opportunity. And I just try to seize it, you know, most of the time. But what you said just took me to a quote from Khalil Gibran, which is kind of one of my most ultimate, you know, shelf book. I always have it somewhere near at hand reach. And it says, if I can recollect it properly, it says something like, between what is meant and not said, and what is said and not meant, a lot of love is lost. And that kind of has always been, you know, between what I want with inside, what my consciousness is really meant to do, and what is expressing on the outside. I've always kind of been always in that duality. And life is here to test you. It's designed to test you. And but it's also a blip in time. And I think I've always been kind of conscious of like how fast life goes. And, you know, every second that passes is a second you never get back. And I think like most of us probably don't really measure the weight of this, you know, time passing and what it means. And to me, it's always been a matter of, if at a given time I have the opportunity, the blessing, the gift, the capacity to do something that will better me and better those around me, and ultimately the collective consciousness, right, that we live in. If I don't do it, then I'm guilty. I'm guilty of charge. It's almost like, to me, like a sin, because I'm refraining to do something that I've been designed to do. And 9 times out of 10, it's for reasons like insecurities, you know, lack of self-confidence, ego, you know, and for very like, you know, ridiculous reasons. So I guess like from early on, I've kind of I tried to live by this sort of like mantra, if you can call it, and try to seize every opportunity or gift that is given to me to do action for improving myself and improving those around me. I'm very conscious, you know, that I'm not a single person in this universe. I'm a vessel for good, but that good has to impact a bigger, you know, a bigger, much bigger than me, I would say, like, right? So collective, family, and others.
Which is what you've been doing, right? I mean, in different projects, in different, let's say, programs that you've either developed or invested in, it's always been some kind of a way to have that social impact.
True, yeah.
But first and foremost, we have to say, you know, I'm doing it because it's fulfilling to me.
Exactly.
Right? It's not, let's not sound so altruistic. It definitely has to be fulfilling. In that servitude or that way of serving is, but you seem to be a person that actually hears those instinctive whispers, right? And not many of us actually have that. Not that we don't have those instinctive whispers.
I think we all have it.
We all have it, but it's been silenced.
Crowded by noise.
What do you do to actually make sure that you hear it and that you don't let go of it? Are there certain exercises that you do? Are there certain, you know, ways? No, you wish, okay.
I wish there were exercises, and I won't even be able to tell you. I know, like, for a big part of my life, I was crowded by so much noise, also external noise, right? Whether it's your parent, what you have to be in society, your, you know, friends, collective, everybody that makes your social being. So I've been myself really crowded by those voices for a long time. But I believe that the marking point, it started to evolve probably before, but the marking point was 2020. 2020 has been a cathartic year for me, and it started surely with the pandemic as we all lived it, but for us Armenian, it really extended into the unfortunate page of the war that happened towards the end of the year. And I think that was when I really realized that I will be committing a sin if I didn't really listen to myself and understand that what I was doing before wasn't fulfilling my soul anymore, really. Like I felt empty. I couldn't see the sense. I completely had lost the why of why I was here on this earth, and both professionally and personally. So, I was kind of like shaken, like a lot of us were. And I think I was just lucky enough maybe that through serendipity or, I guess, concours de circonstances, this journey of jewellery entrepreneurship kind of came onto me, which connected me back to the roots, the earth, and something I can touch, I can feel, and mostly something that is also anchored in my family heritage, because my father is a jeweler for 30, 35, 40 years now almost. So, and I grew up in that atmosphere, and it's always something that I kind of try to push back, because it will not be taking me to the trade centers and those very nice, fancy cosmopolitan.
Well, I wouldn't say it wouldn't, but it will probably take a longer time. So we're talking about Atelier 79, which is, and I think about that story that we spoke about earlier, how after the war and all the emotional, obviously I validate all the emotions that you've been going through, and you're right, we all went through very different waves of emotion, and you actually started to sketch. Yes. You started to draw things. Yes. and just sketches of different pieces. And from that, and each piece was telling a story. And after that, you actually, I guess, you go to your sister Emma and you say, we're going to do this thing together, which is a very creative hub with a very futuristic intention. Tell me what the intention of Atelier 79 is, how it was established, and what your vision is for this beautiful project that is a company now.
So I would say the vision. Was it the first part of your question?
However you want.
What was the first part?
Well, the intention of this.
The intention, yeah. I would say the intention of Atelier 79 is, and was already back then, it was to change the narrative. I was kind of a little bit tormented by our ways to kind of be always at the ending point of what was happening to us. We were always in the reactive sense, right? We were reacting constantly, and now in this fast-paced world, things are coming so fast at us that the future comes so fast that we don't even have time to react. And for us, I always felt that we were really in this sort of like I would say lamentation. I don't know if it's the right English word, but a victim. We were always on the victim side. And I kind of realized that for as long as I can remember about, the connection with Armenia, it's always tied into very sorrowful and deep yet rich stories, but they lack that sort of like sparkle and all the rich colors that you see when you live here. And at that time I was, living here for already a couple of years, and I've always been very connected to this part of my identity, right? I always say I feel like probably as French as I feel Armenian, and during that time probably much more Armenian also than I was French, but I felt like it was time to change the narrative and change the narrative in a more glorious way, because we have so many glorious pages in our history that we just tend to forget it because of the chaotic present we are living in. And to me, it became a mission to kind of set myself to remember and remind people that we have much more glorious pages, we have glorious history that can be shared and that can resonate as universal values to a lot of people outside, non-Armenians mostly. And my intention really became to create a company that will connect with universal values to somebody living in Massachusetts, a young girl living in Paris, a family of grandparents.
Not necessarily Armenian
Exactly,
background.
And actually in the first hand, not Armenians. My purpose was really to show that this cradle of civilization that has 4,000 years of history can connect in a very universal way to anybody, throughout the world, and it can be done in very glorious story and very beautiful stories that deserve to be shared.
So, okay, so then each of these pieces that you've created, right, they actually link to what?
Yes.
Nature, to Gaia, to Armenian history, to womanhood, sisterhood, to what? To
a little bit all of that.
All of that, yeah.
All of the things that you said. We came as like very outsider in this field. Like I haven't done jewelry studies. I haven't studied jewelry management. So I came just with the passion that my father instilled in me, and with all the management sort of like background that I had. And we decided that as outsider, we won't do things like, the big houses are doing it. We won't know actually even how to do them. So we did things our way, and every collection became one ground for a new storyline. The first story that we had, which was our foundational collection, was Almast. And Almast was a tribute to the strong woman, going back to the Satanic and the Nano and the Lara, so many women, that we see in our everyday life that are inspiration and that deserve to be represented. And to me was kind of like those 24 first pieces that we did was just like a tribute to honor all the rich facets and contrast that make women beautiful and wholesome and fabulous creatures. So Almast, which means raw diamond, uncut diamond in Armenian, was that sort of first line. And in each collection we try to have one piece that is really charged with an Armenian something, I would say, or an Armenian strong story. And in that collection, it was the ring Tsovitsov, which was, I created that one during during one of the attacks during the war period in 2021.
During the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, or no, before?
During the war. Yes, during the war. So I think it was back in 2022 when, we saw again like attacks in the Armenia ground soil. And it was a way for me to kind of protect me from all this bubble of, darkness that we were living in, and take us back to like glorious pages, 4th century, 3rd century. There was a time where we will speak about an Armenian kingdom where it will go from sea to sea. And actually that ring is designed in that way. You have the two sort of like pave diamonds that represent the two sea, with the diamonds. And I put in the middle sort of 15 gold marbles that kind of go back and forth just to represent that history, kind of the cyclical aspect of history. And 15 representing the 15 provinces of Great Armenia.
It's a beautiful piece, by the way. Yeah.
I love that piece, because it was created really in the darkest time probably that I've experienced personally. So it's a very strong piece, and Almast is charged with that story, for instance, but not only. All the other piece, you have the unapologetic, you have the hustlers, all that are names and facets of women that we represented in the design aspect in a way that women can feel proud and seen and recognized wearing them.
Right, and I also noticed that you actually bring in your business and finance knowledge also to this company that is a very artistic company, but also has, and I say that because you talk about design thinking and you talk about circular economy, but you talk mostly about conscious capitalism.
Yeah.
And I love that because I tend to think that conscious capitalism is like completely the opposite. You say it's not.
Yeah.
Explain what that is, conscious capitalism and design thinking. What do you mean by that?
Well, maybe I will start by conscious capitalism because it's a more sort of like a paradigm, right? Design thinking will be mostly a methodology that we apply in our everyday life and we try to apply in our work. But conscious capitalism, to me, I've always been very keen of rich contrasted, and I've lived my life that way. I like to do ballet dancing and boxing at the same time because I believe we are made and we are rich from the contrast we nurture inside us. And what struck me with conscious capitalism, which is a term I haven't invented, it exists, it's a very big school of thought, and there are big companies representing that sort of thought process. It's this idea that yes, profit is important, but it shouldn't be the sole purpose for which you create a company. It has to work alongside, if not simultaneously, with the social and environmental and nature caring aspect of whatever you're creating, whether it's a service or product. So it's a triple bottom line, I would say, perspective on things that promotes both economical aspects, because we cannot kid ourselves and think It would be good if by only philanthropy it will be possible to advance this world, but unfortunately, we know it's not possible.
Right.
So it doesn't neglect the economical aspect of making a business profitable, but it doesn't do it at the expense of all the resources, whether it's natural, social, human, that we involved in the process.
Right.
And that's what I love about it, because it's a very interesting synergy of very antinomic world that we are, growing up, always keeping on different side of the spectrum. I've always grew up, I come from a very typical business school, right, background. So to me, business school is trade, is shark, is finance, is the Morgan Stanley, is the Merrill Lynch of this world, and all the others, more social science, aficionados will be good foundation leaders and so on and so forth, which is so wrong. I think the binary aspect of reading this world and this life is really our demise, if I can say. I think it's a very biased way to see the world.
And so with Atelier 79 and with everything else that you've done, you've also really pushed for the idea of design thinking in everything that's being done, and perhaps using this as the the birthplace of many other future programs or projects that could be born out of this hub for design thinking. Is that what direction that you wish to take?
Yes, exactly. You're very right in that sense. It's the direction we aspire to take. I do believe that building a brand it's a promise that you have to consistently work for on the daily, and it's that endurance that makes a brand. It's a promise, and our promise is to create eventually, many years down the road, a hub where all those future thinkers that are not problem solvers but are problem seekers can gather and maybe anticipate the problems before they arrive, because once they're already on your desk, it's too late to solve them. So the idea is to kind of bring in build a structure, a company. It wouldn't be a company, a hub. I guess you used the very right word. I would say in the long run, it would be to grow this company into a hub that can gather a lot of those forward-thinking, forward-looking minds from all around the world and create even greater impact, greater value, by all the exchanges, tangible and intangible, that we can have with all those that rich human capital.
Good.
But I would say that the way we built Atelier 79 is also really anchored into conscious capitalism, right? The business model even is anchored in that, in the sense that we didn't want it to be a work on a stock base, work, as a classical, more traditional jewelry shop can work.
Right.
We didn't want it to function at the source, new resources. So we really opted for this upcycled gold approach, meaning we don't work with, we don't buy gold from primary markets. We buy it from secondary or third market, and then we reprocess it until we get to pure gold and reuse it in our collection. It's exactly the same gold, but it doesn't go at, and directly extracted from a mine or from the capital of Mother Nature, so-called. So, and even the way we do the business model, the value chain is built, is on a short circuit. So the client will go, choose, select the characteristic they want, and then only the piece is made for them and sent to there. So it's a made-to-order kind of model, which promotes limited, logistic, transport, emission, and so on and so forth. Right. So in the way even we built this company, the circular design, which is anchored right in this philosophy of conscious capitalism, was a big part of it. We built it keeping that in mind, and design thinking, because both me and Emma are really passionate and anchored in that field for a good 6-7 years now, and we're teaching it in different university now. It was just natural for us to also implement those methodologies to the model we chose.
Fascinating. Your parents must be so proud of you and Emma.
Well, hopefully they are, yeah.
Narine, Em, Aram, fantastic. Raised your daughters really well.
Thank you very much.
I was going to say, Obviously, you've had a lot of very good mentors. I mean, I think of the different people that have come into your life, even authors like Coelho that actually, have inspired you. What is the best piece of advice that or one of the best pieces of advice you ever have received?
Best piece of advice that I have received.
And I'm sure there are many.
There are there are a lot, and I guess I guess it's one of my mentors when I started, this sort of journey as in the investment field. He was kind of like my mentor throughout this. It was my first job, so he became a very sort of important and paternal, almost like figure in my sort of journey. And he always used to tell me, he would say I was like very careful to make the job, Kerazan syndrome, so that was kind of the thing. I've always been very careful to do things properly, right? Never give myself the chance of doing too much mistakes. And he would see I was like very into things all the time, very heightened and hyped into anything I was doing. And he told me, he said, like, look, don't stress. You're doing it great, but this is not your journey. You're writing somebody else's journey. You probably will leave this corporate world very soon, and because you have too much initiative in you. You see always like something that is not working before anybody else has noticed it, and you want to work on the problem that people haven't yet identified. And it's just not how it works in the investment in the banking field, right? We react to problems. We don't anticipate them. And I guess I've always kept that in mind. And he used to tell me, it's always up to you whenever you'll start that new journey. And he used to tell me, the quote goes by, one day or day one. And he used to tell me that. So stop being like day one. You start. It starts today, and it starts when you make that choice. So I would say, that has stayed kind of like, in your head. In my head. I was like, one day or day one.
Yeah.
You choose. It's always up to you, and nobody else is to blame for you not feeling in your plate, in your daily life, in your profession, in your job, etc. So being proactive has always been a thing, and I think it's I guess, he will recognize himself. So Sébastien Duquet, thank you for what you did. Yeah.
Obviously we continue to witness, atrocities. I mean, we see what's happening in the Middle East. Still in Ukraine and Russia. I'm not even going to say in Africa, and not even going to say, potentially still in Armenia and former what we had in Artsakh or Nakhichevan or Akhalkalak. How do you react to what's happening now, today, in the world? And what is your hope for humanity in general? I know it's a very large-scale question. I ask this only because I know that you're an optimist. I mean, you continue to just move forward, and you're a bulldozer when it comes to just inventing things despite or in spite of the challenges. What is your hope, and how do you see it? Whether it's 5 years from now or even, 3 months from now.
I don't know if I have, I think I used to be a couple years back really into hope, anger, resentment, a lot of those like big emotions, constantly, fighting inside me. And came a point when you start to do, when you enter into the action field and you just do small actions, small deeds, small projects, quick wins, you realize that you don't have time anymore to think into the big boxes that we're growing up into thinking, right? Like you have to be, if you say this, then you're part of this group. If you say that, then you're part of that group. Be careful if you do this group might look at you that way and this way. And I've never been one that liked or feel okay being put in any boxes. Not that I am an anti-system person at all, but I never felt comfortable in the boxes that were given to us as Armenian or as just citizen of this world, right? The binary way of looking at things has always bothered me, and I think we saw that even much more during, if I go back to the war that we experienced, and then we're seeing the same kind of model replicating themselves into the Middle East and so on. It's like being A or B. black or white. I've never liked that, and I believe that the gray zone in the middle is where most of the gaps are to do action, to do good, and to create impact. So I try to focus on staying in that gray zone and just do whatever I'm given the capacity and the opportunity to do. And I try, not to leave anything not done, because to me it's not just a opportunity that is lost, it's actually an impact that I have missed fulfilling for me, and for the people that will be impacted ultimately. So to me is action is my best sort of like ally, I would say. And I think action and change, right? The will to change. And I remember reading like that you have to hate this world enough to want it to change, but be optimistic enough to want to change it. And I guess it's this fine balance between, right, dark pessimism and frenzied optimism that you kind of juggle in, and you're a funambulist in this life anyway. It's just a thread, and you're just invited to walk on it. And I try to, keep the balance between not being too idealistic and not being too pessimistic, because I believe that there are many futures that compete with each other, and it's just up to us to choose the one we want and try to act towards it. So I try to just keep myself in pragmatic action and do what I have to do. That's it.
That's good for me. That's good for me. Tatev, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Very inspirational, and I wish you all the best, not just with Atelier 79, but everything that comes with it in the future for you and Emma.
Thank you very much, Lara Jan. It was an honor being here with you, and I wish us the best for the future.
Amen. Amen.